Kitty Tipton Oakes dies without a will, leaving her 3 adopted sons fighting for her inheritance.
I think he was thinking that he could cut John and I out and prove and that we wouldn't come forth.
But this story is not just about money. The legacy of a famous musician is at stake. And the outcome will reveal a shocking secret that was kept hidden for over 30 years.
That old expression, if you can't trust your parents, who can you trust? Kind of shoots that out the window.
On April 6, 2007, 73-year-old Kitty Tipton Oakes passes away in the Eastern State Hospital in Spokane, Washington. Suffering from dementia and alone on her deathbed, Kitty hasn't been visited by family or friends in months. In fact, Kitty has spent the last years of her life living in seclusion in an upper-class neighborhood of Spokane. Disabled by mental illness, Kitty's only link with the outside world is a professional guardian appointed to her by the state, Thea Scomo.
I went with her to medical appointments. I did the cooking for her, and I gave her a shower. I tried to be for her the daughter that she would have had if she would have had a daughter.
Kitty doesn't have a daughter that anyone knows of, but she does have 3 adopted sons who she speaks of in glowing terms.
Kitty was really interesting. She loved to talk about her past history and was always showing pictures. She always felt as though her sons were still in her life, and she remembered them as young children.
So why weren't any of them with Kitty on her deathbed? The answer stems back to their childhood. Back in the 70s, Kitty is on a high. She's happily married to Billy Tipton, a nationally renowned jazz musician. After 2 hit albums and 3 decades as a band leader, Billy settles in Spokane, where he remains active in the local entertainment scene. Unable to have children of their own, Billy and Kitty adopt 2 sons, Jonathan and Scott.
I remember we used to go camping a lot, and I remember we used to do a lot of stuff outdoors, scouts.
We traveled and went out on the scouting patrols and stuff like that. So, I mean, we had some fun in the summertime.
6 years after their first adoption, the Tiptons adopt a 3rd son, Billy Jr., adding further to their image of the perfect American family.
We did all kinds of things. My brother Scott played the guitar. John played the drums, and me, I used to play the piano.
Kitty, who has struggled with her demons in the past, is proud to have finally achieved the American dream. But her glowing memories are in stark contrast to the circumstances of her death. When Kitty passes away in 2007, her former husband, Billy Tipton, has already been dead for 20 years. She leaves behind an estate worth $300,000. But in the years leading up to her death, Kitty hasn't had any contact with her youngest son, Billy Jr. And she hasn't spoken to her 2 older sons, Scott and Jonathan, in more than 25 years. Since Kitty dies completely alone, the court appoints her legal guardian, Thea Scomo, to take charge of distributing her estate.
I did a funeral for Kitty. Then I was responsible to make an attempt to find legal heirs for the remainder of this estate. Ultimately, that turned out to be a bigger chore than what we thought.
Kitty didn't leave a will, so the court will have to decide how the estate will be distributed. Scomo hires attorney Lynn St. Louis to investigate who Kitty's legal heirs would be.
Well, initially we didn't know that much. We knew that there were 3 boys who were raised by Billy Tipton and Kitty Oakes, and we knew that they had been estranged from their mother, and we didn't know how to find them. And so we needed to hire the services of a private investigator to locate the boys.
The easiest task turns out to be locating Kitty's youngest son, Billy Jr., who still lives in Spokane. Billy is the only family member to attend Kitty's funeral.
I did not know anybody at the funeral. Nobody knew me. And I was kind of thinking, gee, this is strange. You know, a woman that had had a lifetime of giving to others, and hardly anybody was there when she passed away.
Billy Jr.'s older brothers, Jonathan and Scott, left Spokane years before, changing their last names away from Tipton. The 2 brothers are finally located in Idaho by a private investigator. But despite the promise of financial gain, Scott in particular is reluctant to reconnect with his past.
They hired somebody who, I guess, spent quite a bit of time trying to find me. And then when he first contacted me, I told him he had the wrong person. And he's like, no, I know this is you. And I go, you know, I don't want anything to do with this. This is over with, it's done. And he's going, well, you don't have a choice. You have to be a part of this because there's an inheritance and all this other stuff.
Jonathan convinces his brother to retain a lawyer. Under Washington law, adopted children are treated the same as biological children, so this case appears to be quite straightforward. In the absence of a will, all 3 brothers should automatically get an equal share of the estate. But as attorney Lynn St. Louis soon discovers, the Tipton family closet is full of skeletons that will make this anything but a straightforward inheritance.
The facts were just the pieces of the documents, the marriage certificate. There was just a number of things that were not as you would ordinarily expect them to be.
In Kitty's personal files, St. Louis finds 2 wedding certificates from 2 different states, both dated for the same day. More importantly for the division of assets, she finds 3 sets of adoption papers, one for Jonathan, Scott, and Billy Jr.
We were always told we were adopted, so that was kind of a given.
All of the adoption papers turn out to be fakes. Unexpectedly, the news is not much of a surprise to Jonathan and Scott. In fact, 20 years earlier, when their father died, a shocking revelation came to the surface. And from that moment on, the 3 brothers realized that their entire family life had been built on a web of lies.
We just found out that some things weren't done the way they should have been. I think back at that time, if you knew somebody who knew somebody who was in the hospital, you paid their medical, you could take the kid, blah, 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 whatever. Even if they would have said you're illegally adopted, what is that to a 7 or 8-year-old? Adopted's adopted, you know?
Or is it? In the state of Washington, the court has never allowed an illegally adopted child to inherit from a parent who didn't have a will. It soon becomes clear that the 3 brothers might not get a cent from their mother's estate. That's until Billy Jr. produces a document that brings a whole new twist to this family feud.
I think he was thinking that he could cut John and I out and prove and that we wouldn't come forth.
He tried to, you know, pretty much screw us out of everything.
What do Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, and Kurt Cobain have in common? Find out after the break. Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, and Kurt Cobain all died without a will. In fact, over 66% of Americans don't have one. In 2007, Kitty Tipton Oakes, wife of late jazz musician Billy Tipton, dies in a hospital near Spokane, Washington. She leaves behind an estate worth $300,000. But Kitty didn't have a will. And now her youngest adopted son comes forward with what he claims is fresh evidence.
My birth certificate was the only one that had both Kitty and Billy on it, and it listed her as the natural birth mother.
In front of the judge, Billy's lawyer claims that he can prove that Billy is, in fact, Kitty's only biological son.
I was convinced that my client was going to end up being the sole heir of the estate because he was the only one with a certified copy of a birth certificate. He felt pretty genuinely that he was born to Kitty Oakes.
He tried to, pretty much screw us out of everything.
Scott and Jonathan think they have evidence that Billy's claim can't be true.
I think he was thinking that he could cut John and I out and prove and that we wouldn't come forth.
The attorney for Kitty's estate is also skeptical about the claim.
She could have been the mother. However, there was other evidence that we knew of that suggested that she was not the biological mother. In fact, one of the brothers said and submitted an affidavit with the court that his mother had not been pregnant right before Billy was brought home. The older boys were both born in 1963, and I believe it was 1969 when Billy Jr. was born. So these older boys would have recalled, most likely, if their mother had been pregnant.
Is Billy Jr. really Kitty's biological son and sole legal heir? The judge orders a DNA test. And while he waits for the results, he delves deeper into the claims of the older brothers. And their childhood memories will shock everyone. On the outside, Tipton family life looks perfect. But Scott and Jonathan claim it was anything but.
Well, contrary to belief, it wasn't like Leave It to the Beaver. Yeah, Kitty was pretty abusive.
I remember times we would be sitting around the dinner table, we'd be eating, everybody'd be quiet, and then Kitty would just haul off and smack somebody, whoever was closest to her at the table. And then she'd like to get as much in her hands of your hair and throw you around as she could.
Being thrown downstairs, broken noses, beatings with the belt from her. Back in the 60s and 70s, child abuse just wasn't a big deal.
Billy Jr. was still a child at the time, and he remembers life at home differently.
She didn't really physically abuse us. She would yell at you, you could hear it from 3 blocks away. And she had quite vocal cords.
You're a slut! You're lazy!
Well, the youngest one was still a little too young for her to pound on, so Scott and I mainly took the brunt of it. And it came down to, there was 3 ways to leave that house. It was being thrown out, run away from home, or leaving for our safety and hers.
It's like, okay, we are big enough now. I remember the final straw put me over the edge. I had some pretty expensive stereo equipment and everything, and she came and put her hand through it. And finally, I got a hold of her, and I was going to take her outside, and we were done. At that point, everybody stopped me, and we left. I never went back.
Scott and Jonathan are still teenagers when they decide to leave the family home. For months, they live together on the streets.
I remember, you do what you have to, especially in tough times.
It was a struggle at first. It was an adjustment. It was something we had to deal with.
John and I have always been a survivor. We've always been fairly close. I mean, really all we had was each other, so.
Back at the Tipton home, the family dynamic is growing increasingly tense. Billy Tipton Sr.'s caring, mild manner doesn't mesh well with his wife's abusive temper.
She was a disciplinarian, and my dad was he was totally on the other side. He was just like, and that always caused havoc.
I think he had had enough too. with the yelling and the screaming. She was pretty abusive to Billy. I mean, she would get in his face and just yell at him and scream at him all the time. And I think he realized that he realized that we weren't coming back. This was done. We were gone. He can do what he needs to do, but we are not coming back.
With the interests of his sons in mind, Billy Tipton Sr. leaves his comfortable home in Kitty's hands and settles with Jonathan and Scott in a trailer park outside of town. 9-year-old Billy Jr. stays to live in the family home with his mother, Kitty.
I wished everybody could have been together as a family, but I realized that that wasn't going to happen.
Was Kitty's decision to keep Billy living with her evidence that he is in fact her biological son? If family history is confirmed by the court's mandatory DNA testing, Billy Jr. will automatically be a valid beneficiary of Kitty's $300,000 estate.
Fortunately, because Kitty had had extensive surgery, it's procedure to keep tissue samples for 10 years at the hospital lab. And so we had those tissue samples from her to use for DNA testing.
When the results are finally in, Billy's attorney rushes to his client. Billy Jr. is not Kitty's natural child.
You know, I don't know how he thought he was going to get away with it, but whatever. When it comes to money, people will do weird things.
But Billy's attorney thinks this explanation is too simple.
My impression is that my client, William Tipton, was truly desirous of having been a blood-related person to Kitty Oakes. And I'll never forget his response when I explained to him the results had come out. The question he asked for me was, well, if she wasn't my mother, then who am I?
With the adoptions going wrong and so many lies and deceit and just on and on and on, you know, the birth certificate wasn't real. You start thinking, gee, what is real? I mean, obviously I wasn't born under a rock.
As the attorney responsible for Kitty's estate, it's now up to Lynn St. Louis to determine what is real and what isn't, and help the court establish Kitty's rightful heirs.
It became evident that the 3 boys who were claiming were not either biological or legally adopted. So we asked the court to set a hearing date to allow those persons who were claiming to be her heirs to come to court and to show the court their proof.
If the 3 brothers aren't convincing enough, the judge could rule that they don't legally qualify as heirs. The money from the estate would then most likely go to strangers related to Kitty's long-absent father from Ohio. Strangers somehow uncovered by investigators hired by attorney Lynn St. Louis.
Her father was one of 8 siblings, and 2 of those siblings were still alive, and a number of the siblings were deceased but had left children and grandchildren.
Apparently, under law, Kitty didn't have any legal children. But in the final search of Kitty's belongings, Lynn St. Louis makes another surprising discovery. A discovery that leads the court deeper into Kitty's dark past. Allegations of rape and the birth of an illegitimate child. As your family grows, don't forget to update the beneficiaries in your will. For underage children, it's also important to appoint a guardian to care for them. In 2007, Kitty Tipton Oakes dies in a mental hospital, leaving behind an estate worth $300,000. But Kitty doesn't have a will. A search of her belongings has already revealed that her 3 sons aren't legally adopted. But there's more.
There was a birth certificate found listing a female child in the important documents.
Could Kitty have a long-lost daughter, completely unknown to her family?
there were secrets in the Tipton and Oaks families' lives. And that Kitty may have had a child was not stretching one's imagination.
The name on the birth certificate is Pamela Marie Lyon, born June 19, 1945. That's 15 years before Kitty met her husband and decided to adopt children.
They found it in my mother's house. I really don't know what connection it was, where that birth certificate came from.
Attorney Lynn St. Louis feels she has no alternative but to follow the lead, no matter where it might take the case. When Kitty first met Billy Tipton at the age of 28, she was working as a stripper in the same Spokane nightclub where Billy played. Before that, Kitty earned a living working as a Las Vegas showgirl. But it's deeper into Kitty's past that Attorney St. Louis uncovers a disturbing event. When Kitty was only a teenager, she was raped by an older boy and became pregnant. If the mysterious Pamela Marie Lyon listed on the birth certificate is in fact the child from this pregnancy, the outcome of the inheritance could be drastically changed.
Well, had she been the biological child, and if she was not adopted out to another family, then she truly would have been an heir who would have inherited.
The court identifies a Pamela Marie Lyon living in an assisted care facility near Spokane. She is a paranoid schizophrenic. In an amazing coincidence, she is the same legal guardian as Kitty.
Gee, what a coincidence.
To Scott and Jonathan, this new twist in the case is simply an excuse for ScoMo and St. Louis to delay the court proceedings and take more money from the inheritance.
I mean, sometimes when it smells like coffee, it is coffee.
In a legal situation like this, investigation costs and lawyers' fees are paid out directly by the estate.
Here's one perspective, I think. I think that Kitty and this lady, they had a relationship before because she was in her care, doing all this stuff. You know, she's thinking, well, the kids aren't around, they're not legal heirs. If I put this paperwork in there, maybe they won't find the boys, they won't come forward, the money can be awarded to the state, and so this person will have the care they need, and then nobody's ever gonna know anything about it.
Kitty's former legal guardian rejects these accusations.
If indeed Kitty had a female child and had given her up for whatever reason, here was a name that matched with a person who says she was raised by foster parents.
For the second time in this case, the judge orders a DNA test. This time to confirm whether Pamela Marie Lyon is really Kitty's biological child. The test confirms that she's not. So why then was Pamela Marie Lyon's birth certificate found with Kitty's personal files?
It's a possibility that this might have been a child who was considered to be taken in, such as the boys were all taken in, or it might have been a child she was considering adopting.
They're pissing away the estate, doing whatever they could.
It wouldn't have been a waste of time had she really been the biological child. And how were we to know that? So I think it was important to be done.
The court has now spent more than a year chasing empty leads. It looks like Kitty will be found to have no rightful heirs and her money will go to the state. In Washington, an illegally adopted child has never inherited from an estate without a will. The Tipton boys' last hope is to convince a judge to set a state court precedent. To do that, they will need to prove that they were more than a family in name alone. When Kitty and Billy divorce in 1980, Billy moves into a trailer home to look after his two older sons.
Well, Dad was mom and dad. He did both jobs. He took us in, taught us right from wrong, sent us to school, clothed us, feed us. He had a good heart.
A lot of things started to change for all of us. He would do whatever it took to make sure that we were taken care of.
It was a complete 180. Our grades started going up. Even though we had all the luxuries and, you know, of an upper middle class family, we would have preferred to go the other route and not have anything at all, as long as we had our peace of mind and safety.
But a few miles away in the Tipton's family home, youngest son Billy Tipton Jr. continues to live under his mother's care.
Well, I stayed with Kitty for a long time. And then, of course, I always loved her, but of course, you know, didn't agree with her on everything. You know, she kind of resented a lot of things about me, too. So, I mean, everybody has kind of like a love-hate thing, you know. Mother-son type relationship.
Eventually, Kitty makes a drastic and unexpected decision.
Well, it was pretty simple. She came to me one day and she goes, "You're gonna go live with your dad." Packed my stuff, put me outside, and called him and said, "Here he is." And so he took me and I went to live with him.
In the years to follow, Billy Tipton works 2 shifts to support his 3 sons who are back together, living under the same roof.
Yeah, I was so young. My brothers, they had their own things going. They had their cars, they discovered girls, all the normal things. And me, unfortunately, my dad had to work, so again, I was stuck home alone.
By the end of the 1980s, Billy Jr. is the only son still living with his father in the trailer home. And he's about to discover some secrets about his family that he could never have imagined. Now in his 70s, Billy Tipton Sr. is feeling the physical effects of his age. In fact, his health takes a rapid decline in the fall of 1988. In addition to the emphysema that has bothered him for years, an intense stomach pain now seriously debilitates him.
We all tried to get him to go to the doctor. No, I don't need that. And then he started getting weaker and weaker, didn't want to eat anything. Got to the point where I would have to carry him from room to room and, you know, make him as comfortable as I could because he wouldn't go to the doctor.
On the morning of January 21st, 1989, Billy Tipton's continuous refusal to seek medical treatment finally catches up with him.
The last day, when he woke up, I carried him into the bathroom. Then I carried him into the living room. I got him coffee and breakfast and stuff. And then he asked me to come over there, and he just kind of gave me this very strange look and just slumped into my arms. And then he was gone.
At the age of 74, renowned jazz musician Billy Tipton dies on the floor of his trailer from an untreated bleeding ulcer. In death, a secret that Billy Tipton has harbored for life is about to be revealed.
I had no idea until the paramedics showed up. And they, of course, removed the clothing to resuscitate him. And the guy kept saying, "Are you sure this is a man?"
For 30 years, Billy and Kitty Tipton have held on to a shocking secret. A secret that pushes the definition of what it means to be a family. An Egyptian businessman once left his pet mouse $2 million in his will. Although his family thought the request was absurd, they were bound by law to respect it. The children of jazz musician Billy Tipton are fighting in court over $300,000 left by their mother, Kitty. Every step seems to reveal new secrets that threaten their claim to be rightful heirs.
The more we found out, Mom and Dad were never legally married, they were never legally divorced, we were never legally adopted, Dad wasn't really Dad.
For these 3 adopted sons, the biggest secret of all is revealed the moment their father dies.
They, of course, removed the clothing to resuscitate him. And the guy kept saying, are you sure this is a man? Those are the kinds of questions you don't exactly ask when somebody's just died. So I was a little irritated. Then they opened the shirt to try to revive his heart, and there obviously was no doubt. And of course, I was very shocked.
At the age of 19, Billy Tipton Jr. discovers that his father, who lived for 20 years as both a husband and a father of 3, is in fact a woman.
Actually, I kept it to myself. I didn't say anything. How do you tell your family, hey, guess what, Pop's a woman? I mean, nobody would have believed me.
But when Billy's brother Jonathan makes the funeral arrangements, he discovers the shocking news from the funeral director.
He just showed me the autopsy report. And it said, I go, oh, he died of multiple ulcers. Well, yes, but why don't you read that line by line? I read it, and it says, sex female. I looked at him and I'm like, you got the wrong body. No, we don't. And I was like, well, what's the joke? He goes, this isn't a joke. Reality was starting to focus in real clearly. And then I had to tell my brother Scott. I actually went to him and said, do you want to remember Dad for who he is or who he really was? And he looked at me like I've been drinking all night.
He said that on the death certificate for Billy Tipton, they have down here female. And I was like, okay, well, just get it fixed. What are you bugging me for? And he goes, no, there's nothing I can fix. He goes, Dad is a woman. And I'm thinking, okay, he's doing drugs. He drank too much. He partied too hard. Something's wrong here. There was never any signs or clues that would have tipped off. He was very good at keeping this thing secret.
Well, we all grew up kind of private, so we never really saw anybody without any clothes on. So that's just the way it was. And when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, you're not peeking into your parents' bedroom to see what's going on. If you grow up and your dad's a little short, he looks like George Burns, fixed our bikes, took us camping, fixed our go-karts, played ball with us, you're not going to be thinking anything different.
Billy Tipton, the jazz musician, the person, the man, was always respected and appreciated in Spokane. And a large part of the community comes out to attend his funeral.
Well, there's a lot of people at the funeral to begin with. And all these people were giving me their condolences and stuff. And, but inside, I knew the secret.
I think I was in a disbelief, but it was more of kind of a haze that's, just stunned, lost, because it was pretty shocking.
I was very confused and thinking, how could this happen?
I think at first I was bitter, maybe a little mad why he didn't leave something behind explaining why he did the things he did. And then it came to me, his gender didn't matter. He was always there for us. There was never anything funny, so it was like he was Dad. That's all we ever known him as.
Why would Billy Tipton, who was really a woman, live his entire adult life disguised as a man? At the time of his death, this dramatic revelation leaves Billy's sons shocked and confused. At least it helps explain a few things, like why Billy and Kitty had a fake marriage certificate, and why the couple avoided the official adoption process. A more thorough examination of their backgrounds would likely have unraveled Billy's secret. A secret eventually exposed the morning after Billy's funeral.
When the story broke, everybody in the whole world wanted a piece of it.
The media was all over my lawn, my house. Phones wouldn't stop ringing.
You know, so there was offers of lots of money, fame, so on and so forth.
Attorney Robert Crary was hired by the Tiptons to execute Billy's will.
When Billy passed away, there really wasn't much of an estate. There were not a lot of assets. There was not a lot of money.
At the time of his death, Billy owned nothing but his clothes and a few musical instruments. But he was worth much more than he thought.
Clearly, the most valuable asset of Billy's estate was his story. It's a very unique and charming and a wonderful story, quite frankly.
In his short, handwritten will, Billy doesn't designate the rights of his story to anyone in particular. But he appoints Kitty as the executor of his estate. Kitty and her sons initially agree not to share the details of their private life with the public. But as the story gains momentum in the national press, the media becomes more persuasive.
You know, once I think human nature is when there's money involved, things tend to change, you know.
I'm in a supermarket one day, and you know how you read all this stuff going through the checkout stand? I see Star magazine, and it said my singing star hubby was a woman, and I never knew. And I'm like, what? So I pick it up, and there's a picture of mom and dad on the cover.
Kitty's claim that she didn't know Billy's secret only makes the story more valuable.
I figured Kitty was trying to sell the story to make some money. That started the ball rolling with her trying to profit on everything else.
I can't believe you went to the tabloids with this story. Don't you have any respect for Dad?
When Kitty and her sons meet at the trailer home for the division of Billy's few possessions, their discussion turns to another issue. Should Kitty or any of her sons profit from Billy's incredible story?
She realized there was a story here, and there was an opportunity to make money. Movie deals, picture deals, the media, the tabloids, which to me would be kind of embarrassing.
We would have preferred him going to the grave with the secret. So then we talked to Billy, asking what is he going to do.
We gave Billy an opportunity. It was like, okay, you better make your decision on what camp you're going to decide with.
He made his choice, he sided with Kitty. That was the beginning of the split.
But Billy Jr. remembers things differently.
You know, I didn't really choose sides. It just, the dispute had always been there between the three of them for many years, you know, since the late 70s. And of course, my two brothers and me we hadn't been close for a long time. When I was growing up, and then I didn't have time for a little brother. And then Kitty was there. She's like, well, you know, now that this thing's broke, you want to go with these interviews with me, do these television things. So I said, okay.
このニュースは家族は死んだ父親が女性だったことを誰一人知らなかった。
As Billy Tipton's story is told in magazines and on TV across the world, Kitty hires an agent and makes appearances on many of America's major talk shows. On the shows where Billy joins his mother, the 19-year-old seems lost, still in shock by the death of his father and the secret it revealed.
I decided to go ahead and do these interviews in the magazines and so on and so forth because I was trying to figure it out myself. I was like, maybe somebody could help me figure out what happened.
Billy Jr. may never know the real motives behind his father's gender masquerade. But through the media's coverage of the story, he learns very publicly that his father grew up in Kansas as Dorothy Tipton and allegedly began dressing as a man to further her career as a successful jazz musician.
just the way the story was told, that she wanted to make a living as a jazz musician back in the early 1930s, I believe. And back then, women weren't too involved in show business, except for colored women. You figured you can make money and a living. I'm not sure if the idea was to have a lifelong thing on this, but it turned out that way.
For 50 years, Billy wore bandages to disguise his chest. But how could his own wife not have known the truth?
And you never had sex?
No, in any way, no.
No.
For her to say she never knew, that's a far stretch. Because they slept in the same bed for 20 years. How can you not know? I mean, personally, I'm gonna know what's there in 20 minutes.
The questions that we always had is why she ended up with the house and everything, and how was she able to keep it because she didn't work. And Dad seemed to take everything that he constantly made, and it was always gone.
I always wondered why. I don't know, maybe because she knew the secret?
You know, there's so many theories out there. You know, things that we heard that she was getting money from him so she could keep the house and everything, you know, some type of a blackmail thing.
He was pretty well known.
Each other's privacy.
And you never had sex?
No.
Still in shock from the revelation of their father's secret and disgusted by their mothers profiting from it, Scott and Jonathan changed their last name and moved out of Spokane, away from all the media attention.
New life, new start. It was time to go.
Like 10 years before, when they left the family home as teenagers, the two brothers renounced their father's money in order to break ties with their mother and with their past. This time, they settle in the neighboring state of Idaho, where they still live today.
It was already a torn apart family, but it just kind of like, you know, split us even farther apart.
For the next 20 years, the Tipton family divides itself into two opposing camps that ignore each other. In Idaho, Scott raises a family of his own and remains very close to his brother Jonathan. And in Spokane, Billy Jr. gets married and has 3 children. More importantly for his claim on the inheritance, he continues to visit with Kitty.
She hadn't seen John Scott in many, many years. So I was the only one of the original family that actually stuck around.
Billy Jr. claims to have looked after both his parents in their twilight years. The court will now have to decide if that entitles him to a greater share of the inheritance. In 1925, the widow of a British manufacturer died, leaving the longest will ever recorded. Find out how long after the break. The longest will ever was recorded in Britain in 1925. It was over 1,000 pages. 3 sons are illegally adopted. The father that raised them turns out to be a woman. And now their mother dies without a will. Now in court, the sons must convince a judge that they're entitled to inherit their mother's $300,000 estate and control the valuable legacy of their father, a respected and admired jazz musician. Finally, after a year and a half of proceedings, Jonathan and Scott arrive in Spokane for the trial. This is the first time they've returned to their hometown in over 20 years.
And I told John, I go, you know, this is the final chapter. If we get something out of it, then at least we get something out of it. So we had to pull together and do what we had to do.
At the hearing, one of the most important things the judge must determine is whether Kitty would have included her sons in her will had she made one.
She had told me that she was going to leave me everything, but she just, I guess, never got around to it.
I think she would have took it to her grave, just to give us one last spite.
During the period of time that I represented her, she was not getting along very well with the older 2 boys, and I know she was very close with her younger son, Billy Tipton Jr. And it's my opinion that that's who she would have wanted to leave the estate too.
We're sitting in the hallway, and my brother's sitting next to me, John, and he goes, "There's your brother." And I'm looking around, I go, "Where?" He goes, "That guy in the leather jacket." I go, "You gotta be kidding me."
At that point, I hadn't seen either one of my brothers in, close to 25 years, I think. They sat behind me and my attorney, and they had their own attorneys on the other side.
I talked to him for a minute, and I told him that I didn't appreciate him trying to screw us out of the will. I wished him good luck, and I go, "But I don't ever want to see you again." So I left it like that. Scott pretty much treated him like a leper.
The court acknowledges that Billy stayed with his parents longer than the other two boys. But when Billy is under questioning, another secret is revealed. A few years before her death, Kitty started having paranoid symptoms, and she asked Billy to move back into her home to take care of her. But after only 2 weeks of living together, Kitty complained to the authorities that Billy was stealing from her.
I tried to tell him that, she wasn't completely mentally sound, I didn't think, and that there was no proof of it. I did not realize that at the time she was as sick as she was. She had Alzheimer's dementia, I think.
The dispute resulted in Billy Jr. being evicted from the house once again, this time along with his whole family. This is how Kitty became the responsibility of the state.
That was, it definitely was a bad day.
When they're called to the stand, Scott and Jonathan are finally given the chance to tell their side of the Tipton story. In their compelling testimonies, the two boys tell the court about their childhood beatings, the splitting of their family, and the emotional scars left by the shocking discovery that their father was really a woman.
That old expression, if you can't trust your parents, who can you trust? Kind of shoots that out the window. So, I trust people to a certain extent. It's made me a little more skeptic about people. I remember one of the questions that was given to me by Lynn St. Louis, and she asked me, "Why is it you only saw her twice in 28 years?" When you're physically, mentally, and verbally abused, that doesn't inspire a lot of trust and loyalty. You don't want to go back to that.
And it seems like nobody seemed to know anything about what we had gone through, and then it came up in John's testimony about the abuse, and now all of a sudden everybody starts listening.
Will it be enough to convince the judge to establish a legal precedent and include the boys as heirs? In his decision, Superior Court Judge Michael Price later agrees. Until trial, the court didn't grasp the incredible life ramifications the Tipton children had dealt with. They should know that they absolutely did nothing wrong here. They just tried, as best they could, to live with the hand which they were dealt. As dysfunctional and separate as this family eventually became, it is clear to the court that it was still a family. Despite not being legally adopted, the three sons of Kitty Tipton Oakes each inherit an equal share of her estate. Or at least, what's left of it. Once the fees owed to guardians, lawyers, and investigators have been deducted.
There's pages and pages of where this money's been all just spent and pissed away.
Everyone's been taking their piece of the pie, and they don't care what we went through.
The attorneys, they always win these kinds of things. They got the majority of it.
Of the $300,000 originally left behind by Kitty, only a little more than $100,000 is left to be divided among her three rightful heirs. Each of Kitty's sons receives $35,000.
Most of those fees would have been avoided, of course, had there been a will that clearly determined or indicated to whom the estate should pass.
For everyone in the Tipton family, it's been a traumatic journey. There is still much that divides the brothers. But for Scott and Jonathan, the ultimate satisfaction lies in the opportunity to finally tell their side of the story and have it acknowledged in open court.
I was telling my brother, I go, you know, there's so much wrong that has been done. Let's just tell people what actually really happened.
We had to fill in the blanks. And if we didn't say anything, people were going to start believing her.
And if the Tipton boys died today, do they have a will?
I do not. Not yet.
You always think you got another day, you got another day, you got another week, you got another month, you know, another year.
And eventually I will put something together before it's too late.
It'll get there.
Oh, well, after all this fiasco, I went and had my will taken care of. It's all completely legalized, sitting in my safe that, you know, someday, you know, many, many years from now, my kids will look at and say, well, gee, Dad left us $10 each.